Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about some weird thing that Saul came up with.
I didn't come up with it. I just thought it was interesting.
And what is it?
Oh, using in media res in your RPG session.
Which technically means in the middle of the action.
Or the middle of the story, depending on who you ask. So in media res, what does it mean? In the middle of the action, in the middle of the story. I think you have seen movies that do this. I have read books that did this, even though at the time I didn't know exactly there was a term for what was going on, but it sure seemed pretty cool to me. The first book that I remember reading that used in media res is A Gathering of Evil by Michael Stackpole, which was a dark conspiracy novel.
That's not surprising.
He started the story with a guy in an ambulance as he's waking up. And he doesn't know. First, he realizes he doesn't know who he is. He can't move. He's paralyzed, and he's thinking he's being taken to a hospital. And then, as he can hear the attendants, or what are they called? Not attendants. What are they called?
Thieves?
No, the people in the ambulance. The what he thinks are EMTs. They start talking about how much his body parts are gonna fetch on the black market. And they start listing off his liver, his eyeballs, and then he realized that he's in deep doo-doo. Unfortunately for these EMT type guys, he is slowly starting to get, his paralyzation is starting to wave off. Or
they didn't give him enough, whatever they gave him to paralyze him.
Correct. And so he's able to move his fingers, and then by the time they offload him onto a gurney to take him to a facility where they're going to harvest his parts, he's able to move enough to be able to defeat him and take him out. Was it like the Bourne Identity, some super secret agent type guy, because he's like does all these fancy karate moves and takes the weapons away and stabs them in the eyeballs and heart and all this. A really fast paced action. Then he's on the run, right, trying to figure out what's going on. Another book which is quite old.
I have to ask you.
Yes.
What does this have to do with role playing games?
Well, I'll get there. I just want to explain what examples of in media res.
I was just making sure.
I'll get there. Slowly but surely. You know me. I like taking my time getting to the point. So another one is the Iliad or supposedly the Odyssey, which I read the Odyssey. I never read the Iliad, which was it the same book? I always thought there was separate
It's an
books.
epic poem.
Okay. Well, anyways, in the Odyssey, it starts 10 years after the war has started. So a whole lot of stuff has gone on. And there's also movies about it and stuff, though the movie isn't as good as the book, believe it or not. But it's a good book. It starts in media res, and there's all kinds of other books that do it. Movie wise,
Star Wars.
I hadn't even thought of Star Wars, and it totally starts in the middle of the tale, in the middle of the story, and action. Choo choo choo. Those one ship chasing the other ship.
Yes. You don't know what's going on, but you know that something's been going on for a while.
Right. And even you could do like a slow burn, kind of a soft in media res. This doesn't mean action. For example, John Wick. The story starts with him just getting up and taking care of his puppy. And something's weird about this guy, right? Because he's like, he doesn't work. He's super rich.
And he does the flashback?
There's a story behind it. There's obviously something going on in his past, or something that happened in his past that's hugely important. But we as the watcher have no idea who John Wick is, that he really likes his puppy, that he lost his wife shortly before the movie starts. And then they kill his puppy.
Which was a very bad choice on their part.
And then the story goes crazy after that. But exactly. So I was thinking, a lot of people say, oh, you should start your game in media res, your RPG session. And I'm like, wow. How would you do that was one. And another one is, well, how would you do that?
It's the same thing. You just said the same thing twice.
I know, but I'm just thinking, what would you need to think? How would it work? For me, the most important thing for in media res game to work is the players have to buy in. Because if the players are not, if the players don't go along with it, then your game is going to just grind to a halt. I've read this one person said that he started in an action scene. He says, these guys in black uniforms are chasing you and shooting at you, and you're in a busy New York street. What do? The players might stop and say, "Okay, who are they? Why are they chasing us? Blah blah blah." And
why am I in New York running?
Whatever, or whatever, right? But
what's my motivation?
That would really be terrible. The motivation is not to get shot, right? Where this is going to work is players who will easily adapt to that situation. Say, "Okay, I'm going to jump behind a." Let's say there's 3 or 4 of you. Casey says, "I'm going to jump behind a dumpster and provide cover for the other 3 people who are running." You don't even know who those people are, other than the character, unless you talked about the characters beforehand, and in a session 0, right? You have players who will actively engage in that kind of situation. Just they stop the action and start asking questions. Well, who are we? What are we running from? Who would want us to shoot at us?
It's going to slow down your action
considerably
and totally ruin your.
Well, not ruin, but yes.
Yeah, it would ruin it.
Yes.
You're in media res trying to start it in the middle of the story.
So you would want players who are buying in and who are able to deal with that situation.
But you would have to do it without telling them that that's what you were going to do, right?
Right. You could kind of gauge, depending on what kind of players you have at your table, you can gauge how successful this kind of start of a session would work. So first of all, you would look at your players and you have to assess how they would react.
Okay, so to be successful at this, I think the first thing you would have to do is you would definitely have to have, and I hate to use the term session 0 session 0,
same thing,
whatever. You would have to, and Saul does this before he starts a campaign. He used to do it through email, and now that we don't meet anybody in person currently, I'm not sure how he does it. I guess it's still through email, but when you create your character, you should create your character before the game starts.
Oh, yeah.
So that I see lots of problems with this. The first problem being that what if you created this character that is like a total goody two-shoes and only does good things, right? Where you start the action where they're running from people with guns. Well, maybe why would they be there? So the character's going, well, I didn't make my character to do this. So you'd have to know everybody would have to know who their characters were and know who each other was to be able to do this.
Right.
To pull it off successfully.
Maybe. I think, like I said, you have to assess your players as far as how good they are at dealing in certain situations, at least in the role-playing situations. For example, I made a little list. I said actively engaged players, right? So players who are actively engaged at the table, meaning that they're willing to, one, actively role play. They're not sitting back waiting for you to describe what the dungeon looks like. They're like, okay, is there any traps in the room, or what are the walls made out of? They're actively asking questions that about their environment, their character's environment. So you want active players.
If you're just starting the game, how are you going to know that?
Well, I mean, usually it works with people who right? I guess if you're talking about like running at a con where people sign up and you have no clue as to who they are or what kind of player they are, I think that'd be a little tougher. Of course, you have not advanced notice, but if you're like me, you would have pre-generated characters for this game. And maybe a little note or very small, a little blurb that tells the player who this character is in as little verbs and nouns as possible. Because if you give them a one half a page note about what the character is, they may not read it, or they may not understand, or it may not sink into them. But if you have like one, maybe 2 sentences about that describes your character, I think you're better off. In that case, if you try to do this at a con with strangers or anybody who signs up and shows up at your table, I think it's a little tougher. But I think it could be done, like I said, as long as you give enough information on the character sheet that tells them who they are in a very little time.
My suggestion would also be, besides doing that, would be like to, right before you start the first scene, would be to say, introduce your characters to each other, that kind of thing, where out of game, right? Where just
Yes.
say, oh, wouldn't matter if you were sitting down playing at a convention or sitting down with your 4 friends that you play with every week. You could say, oh, this is who I am, and this is how. And I would suggest, which Shannon always, how do you know the person sitting next to you, kind of thing, right?
Oh, that's good.
So that they would have that 5 minutes of connection with all the characters before you throw them into a crazy scene.
Yeah, that definitely is helpful, and that obviously once you develop connections to each other, I think you develop also
empathy for that
a reason
why you're going to save that guy.
Why you would care about the fellow player next to you. So another thing I think is players must be willing to improvise, because they may not know a lot of what's going on. They know as much as you put down on a character sheet, maybe as much as you give a quick bio or background of who that character is, and whatever they listen to or hear from at the beginning of the game with your player introductions of each of themselves. And that's not a whole lot, but if they're able to improvise, like I said, if you ask them, what are you doing as a GM, and they're like, I don't understand, and they're still stuck on the idea that they don't know why they're being chased. They want to know why they're being chased, so they're able to.
Just so you know, there's always going to be that one player who's going to be like that.
Well, I don't know. I think as the hobby expands, it becomes more mainstream. How do we dare say that?
I wouldn't say that.
As it becomes more popular, I think more
ideas
are coming into role playing, or becomes vogue, or becomes more popular within the hobby. I think improvisation is on the rise in a lot of games, because you have an influx of different ideas coming from theater and movies and actors, and just looking at, for example, if you watch actual plays, there's a lot of improvisation in those.
You mean role playing?
Right, actual plays of role playing, like Critical Role.
No, you mean role playing, not improvisational. You mean they're role playing with each other,
right? But
they're just feeding off of each other versus just
following
saying,
along.
My character is doing this,
right?
And
well, they're also improvising as to what their situation. They're adding stuff to the story that doesn't necessarily isn't what the GM put in there. So there's a lot
that
of
that the GM put in there. I think that this would be a little bit harder to do if you've been running a campaign with guys for 20 years, and you always start off at the beginning of the campaign, and they know that the first 2 sessions. I was reading about this, so this comes from my readings. You've been playing with these guys forever, and they know that the first 2 sessions of the campaign are going to be as boring as hell, and you're just feeding them information about what they've been doing and where they are and who the person is that they're working for, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm following you.
So if you're going to try that with these people, you might want to...
You might jar them too much.
Yeah, you might shake them up just a little bit too much. They'll go, what? Although it may work, it may not. I mean, you're right that you need to know your players, but if you've been playing with the same people and you want to mix it up a bit and try this, which I guess has been going on for a long time, because the posts on Reddit went back to like 2010 and 2006. There were articles about this for role playing.
That's sort of recent, considering.
Sort of recent, yes.
Considering, what is it? Role play
some people
started
in the 70s.
70s, right? And so you're talking 30 years after. Yeah, 30 years after it started. You're talking about this in media res article, and I'm sure some people tried it before, but I think it's just an interesting concept in story that people are going, man, that really worked in that movie. I really liked it. I think it was fantastic. The game started in the middle of the story, or in most games, it's in the middle of the action, and you get away from that. Oh, you go to a tavern, you see a bunch of guys, or you see the thing on the wall that says wizard hiring a party of adventurers, please apply at table B. Right? It's just like, oh my god, that would be so boring.
It's a different type of trope to use, right?
I think it's a trope, but it's also something that is relatively new to role playing.
I think that it could be a little bit easier if you gave yourself a lot of what do you want to call it? Advantages, such as
Okay.
talking to the characters about who having the characters introduce themselves. But also when you start your scene, if they're propelling down a wall with something they just stole that they needed to get, you don't need to tell them why they needed to get it, but you could say something like, you have got the secret formula and that you've been looking for the last 3 months, right? So that then you're kind of answering their questions before, as they're going, what are you going to do? They're shooting at you. Or you just took out the helicopter and you give them kind
Helicopter?
of you give them different kinds of things,
Right,
to help them along the path, they have a clue as to what's happening, right?
Right. And I think when you hand over the characters of the game, they're gonna get a clue as to what kind of game it is, right? Like if you hand over a character sheet and your name is I can't think of it, but or the skills of this person is safe cracking, breaking and entering, or whatever comparable stuff to that is,
which you would kind of go over in your session 0, right?
Well, if you are in a long-term campaign, yes, but if you are playing at a con, probably no, because there's probably no session 0. I think the immediate res is like a way of starting the game, like I said, with a bang, and I think the less the players know, the better, I think, because they'll be more shocked. Now, if you tell people, oh, I want to run a heist game, okay. So, people think of Ocean's 11 where there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of this and that. Oh, I'm going to need a safe cracker. I'm going to need someone who's breaking entry. I need a face man who's a con artist type person. All that stuff is going on. So they make their characters, and then instead of them planning the heist, it's right after the heist, right? Pulp Fiction, I think. Not Pulp Fiction, the other one. Reservoir Dogs. They're running for the cops.
The driver you hired just got shot.
Yes, right, exactly. So I think that is a different game than they're badasses or something, like if they might be spies or whatever, but they're not going to plan. The whole idea, even the res, for me, is to put the players' characters in a situation where they have to act and react quickly, not this ponderous planning and thinking of how they're going to break into something, which they might have been thinking that's what the game was about. So I think it's about surprise. I think it's about surprising your players and putting them in a situation that they probably weren't expecting, and them reacting to what is going on. And the faster they react, the better it is for the game, because that's what you're going after. I think as a GM, when you do that, when you plan an in-media res game,
it's really just the beginning scene, right? Because from there, it's just
right
playing, right?
Yeah, the rest of that. But I think, like I said before, so your players, they have to be actively engaged. 2, for me, the players are willing to improvise, because improvisation is probably really important, especially when they don't, especially have players who like to know everything before they can act.
Yes, and some players are like that. They want to have every second plotted out before they start the heist.
And they always have like this analysis paralysis of like, okay, they want to explore every option before they act.
But as a GM, I think you should be prepared for whatever that improvisation is going to take,
right.
Whatever form it's going to take, because you never know what the players are going to do, right?
Well, yeah.
There's the analysis paralysis on one side, but say they're going to pick something that you didn't think of, but you're going to need to be able to go with it too.
Correct. So, and then the third thing was the players must fully participate. You can't have a player that's like,
well, you can't.
You can, but you don't want a player who's just going to sit there and just like, okay, I'll follow Charlie. Okay.
Well, and if they do that, then you could also engage them, right?
Or kill the character. No, just kidding.
I don't know that would be a good opening scene.
I don't know. You would probably want to somehow force that character or that player to act.
You could try.
Right.
You could actively engage them.
Right. Put that character in situations where they need to do something, or it's going to be terrible for that character.
Right.
They might get caught. They might get shot. Whatever. So you're right. On the other side, the GM, right? The GM who wants to do this, there's certain things you have to think about.
I think the most important thing to think about is that you shouldn't be disappointed if the players don't do what you think they're going to.
Well, number one for me was able to improvise, right? Because you gotta come up with things, because the players are going to do something that they may not be used to doing. So let's say you've been playing with a group for 20 years, 10 years, right? So you kind of know how they act and react to certain situations. You know, okay, I know Phil is never gonna engage in hand-to-hand combat. He's gonna want to attack from a distance. I know Jerry is a full-on, he's just a tank. He's got a huge armor, or lots of armor, and he's wants to go face-to-face, toe-to-toe with the enemy, so on down the line. But let's say you put them in a situation that they're not used to. They're gonna do some weird stuff, at least weird to you. And if you at a table at a convention, you never know what they're going to do because you have no history with these players. So you're going to have to improvise. Number two, you're going to let your players drive the story. They're the ones that are going to come up with stuff. The more they come up with it, the more ideas they come up with, the less you have to run in the other game as you run the game. And then the third, I think, is what you were talking about, is you have to accept that the players may take the story in a direction that you hadn't thought of,
and be prepared for it, right?
And how do you prepare for the unpreparable? I guess you know what I mean. The only thing you can prepare for is that the players are going to do something that you may not have thought up of, and that's cool. To me, that's cool. But some GMs, right? They kind of pre-plan everything. They expect this is gonna happen, and then the players are gonna run down this alley. They're gonna bust into this.
What if they pick a different alley or go up on the roof? I mean, so I think what you're suggesting is that even if you have plotted out your storyline, thinking this is what they're gonna do,
right, that
you should be prepared to get them to the next scene without using any of that.
Correct. So I'm just thinking, like, yeah, you're right, and I think if you are a good GM, you're gonna, one, not railroad them, right, and two, if you're running this kind of game, improvisational game, or not improv, but in media res, you have to let the players add stuff to the story because you are putting them in a position where they really can't prepare for, right? They're just in the middle of the action. They may have a lot of information, but they have little information about what's going on really, other than they're being chased or something's going on. So let's say they run into an alley and you expect them to pick a lock of this door, right? But when somebody's being chased, they may like, well, I don't have time to pick a lock. I'm gonna try to bust down the door. Okay, you can't. And then they might get stuck, right? And so let's say someone goes,
well, why wouldn't you let them bust the door down?
Well, I don't know.
I would.
It wasn't in your notes.
Well, I think that it not only knowing who the other characters are, but also knowing what they have with them.
Their abilities.
Yeah. Like, so in that two sentence or 3 sentence blurb that you're putting up there, you should make sure that Charlie knows that he has his machine gun under his coat, or something like that.
Well, so like I would say that let them add stuff to the situation, like a fire escape. Oh, he goes, this is New York. This got those ugly fire escapes that always, and then he goes, well, it's too high. Well, I'm going to get Jerry and I'm going to launch him into like a alley-oop so he can get up there. And they're like, and so, but you don't want to say, no, you can't do that. Yeah, no, you can't climb that wall. Oh, no, busting down the door is not going to work.
So you want to be a yes GM.
Well, there's that.
A yes, but GM.
Yeah. Or yes, and,
Yes.
So I think because of that, the story's going to change. Instead of them going through that door, they go up the fire escape. So, like I said, it's just, I think if you're gonna put the players in a position where they have to think fast on their feet, that game might go in a direction that you never planned. Now, normally, I would say you should always plan on players never going the direction that you plan on going.
Because that's the usual.
That's the usual for me and my players. Because I try to be very open-ended. I try to say, well, okay, this is the situation. What are you guys doing? And there's no right or wrong to however they attack the situation or deal with the situation.
Right.
And I think sometimes you say, that's terrible because I don't know what to do. You can do whatever you want, right? So one thing is that I try to do is I give them obviously something to do, right? There's a problem. And to me, like I've said before, I like the idea of not having an idea how to solve that problem, even though by instinct I already have one or two ways the problem could be solved. But really,
you just let them get there by themselves.
Players are not going to come up with the same idea that you have in your head. And for me, that's fun. But at the same time, when you're a GM and you like heavy notes and you like pre-planning things ahead of time and encounters and stuff like that, you're like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Well, just because you're starting it in media res doesn't mean that you don't have to have the next scene, and I'm using air quotes because
it works so well on the podcast.
Yes. But you got to get through that in that first scene of in media res, right? Where you're starting right in the middle of the action or the middle of the story.
Right.
You're still going to have to, when they get done with that, that's not going to be the entire game, right?
Right. No.
So you're going to have, so now you've made it back. It fades to black, and you've made it back to your lair or your
safe
base,
lair.
or the office, or wherever.
The evil guys have lairs.
Yes.
I think the good guys theoretically have a home base or something.
And then from there, unless you're going to keep doing crazy things.
I don't think I'm going to in media res the whole game, but I think it's a very good way to start the game. Instead of you mean a tavern or whatever.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, because I think you could do it in lots of ways. You could do even with a D&D group, you could have them being berated in front of the local town, either the king or the magistrate or whatever, saying, you messed up this job. Because you did that, you're going to have to do blah, 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 blah. And so they kind of know where they're coming from and where they're going as he, throws them into some crazy situation, right?
Right. Yes. I think it's just a interesting way of starting a game. And like I said, there's all kinds of factors that you as a GM must consider when you're thinking about starting a game in media res, because it can be daunting for certain players who are not used to, they just want to be told, okay, where's the monster? Okay, now that the monster's dead, where is its gold pockets, or where's its wallet? And so players who are like that, they might have a great difficulty trying to, if you put them in a situation that they can't plan, that they can't assess. That's a big deal, right? Because a lot of players like to assess the situation and then act accordingly, whatever that means.
Let that player go last.
Well, you make them go first, right?
No, I would make them go last, especially if I knew that they like to plot it out in their brain, right? So give them a couple minutes while your tank, who always goes first, right, just goes, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? Or they go, you're telling them they're being chased by guys in black in New York and they're shooting at them. Well, who knows? One of your players might go, well, let's kidnap one of those guys and figure out what's going on. That kind of.
I didn't even think about that.
That's the first thing I thought about.
I did not even think about that. Exactly. So as a GM who you hadn't even planned that or had an idea, let's say they make it through that fire escape and they go into an apartment building and then they're being chased, right? Theoretically. Well, they can turn the tables on the chasers, right? And let's trap them, like you said, trap one and grab them, ambush them, I should say, not trap them.
Interrogate him.
And, or just put them, get them. Oh, okay, we have a car nearby. We'll put them in the trunk and get out of here.
Exactly.
Let's say they get that far. So now you got to deal with the idea that they got this guy and what information that guy may or may not have.
Since he was just Mook number 5.
Yes. Now he has a name, right? He has a girlfriend and maybe a son.
Suddenly, yes.
Suddenly, yeah.
Suddenly, he becomes a major part of your plot.
And you make it so it's not easy to eliminate him, right? He has let's say he has a wallet. He has baby pictures of his son who's turning 1 tomorrow.
I don't know. Tommy told me I just had to chase you guys.
And the reason it is because he's being extorted by the man who is behind his nefarious plot.
So you end up letting him go because...
Well, maybe. I don't know.
You get as much information out of him as you can, unless one of your players is, just shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy.
NCIS,
Yeah.
Los Angeles. Yes, I don't know if you can have a whole campaign like this, but
No.
But I think at least the opening scene can really revitalize your game, especially if you've gotten tired of the beginning of the session or the beginning of the campaign with the tired tavern. No, I don't even know if people still use that.
I think it's both the player and the GM, because like if you play with the same people all the time and you know that those first 2 gaming sessions are just going to be you guys figuring out how your characters know each other and why you're there, and it's going to take the second session for you to figure out what you're doing because the GM is trying to get you to interact and do stuff, and you're just like bored because this is the 18th time we've played this game. It's going to be the same as all the other games. Maybe you need a new GM or you need to do it yourself or something.
Yeah, you might want to rotate that GM out. I think I sort of did this when I started the Save the King game, D&D game, but it was over email, like you said. I do like using emails, and we never got together to do a session 0. Jolene,
but our email was the session 0. We didn't even know session 0 existed then.
Yeah, even then Jolene was against it, even though she didn't know about it.
That is not true.
But what I did was, I think I've talked about it before, I sent everybody emails. They had their characters described to me. I go, okay, so this is what's happening, and then at the
he also drew connections,
right, between players, right? Every player character knew another player character, and so they knew each other, and then all hell broke loose. This happened. It was
in Cormier, and we left the city.
Yeah. So now I don't remember if you guys role played before leaving the city, or that's where the game started.
That's where the game started.
Was you guys leaving the city all at the same time?
Yeah.
Because you guys were on.
We were all running.
Yes. Okay. So I did do that. So it was sort of in media res because they really didn't start playing until they're leaving the city, and they were all had different reasons for leaving the city, and they were all not good. So I think it was interesting. I think that was about as in media res of a game as I've ever started, which I didn't even know I was doing at the time.
So there you are.
So there it is. So I think they could be fun. I think there's certain type of players that'll be more difficult to make a successful run in media res. As a GM, you have to be very improvisational. You have to let players have a lot of player agency, and you gotta let go of the idea that you can predict everything that's going to happen in the game, because it's just not going to happen. Normally, I would say you shouldn't do that anyway, but in a media res where people are reacting instantly to what's going on without a full base of knowledge, they're going to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And you got to be prepared for that. How do you prepare for crazy stuff? You got to roll with it. There you go.
So there you go. Good luck. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.